I never thought I'd be digging through my mom's stuff. Not like this. She died 3 weeks ago, and my dad, well, the man I've always called my dad, kept us in this weird, quiet bubble. He wasn't mean, not overtly, but there was always this distance, like I was some kind of inconvenience he had to tolerate. After her funeral, the house felt wrong. Too quiet, too empty, too full of things she used to touch and leave behind, and now I was alone in the silence. I'd been in the attic a couple times before, but mostly to grab Christmas decorations or my old baseball gear. I never went deep. This time, I was restless. Angry, honestly. I wanted something, anything, that belonged to her, that could explain why she had always seemed sad. There's a smell up there. Dust, old wood, mothballs, and the faint sweetness of her perfume that lingered on nothing but air. I was poking around, looking at boxes labeled in her perfect cursive, photos, receipts, letters. Then I found a small, leather-bound journal. It wasn't fancy, just worn around the edges, corners soft from handling, but it had her handwriting. Her actual handwriting. I almost didn't open it. Feels weird, right? Reading someone's private thoughts after they're gone. But something in me snapped. I needed to know her. Needed to know why she looked at me sometimes with this mix of love and something else. The first few entries were normal, almost boring, stuff about grocery lists, my stupid school projects, her whining about dad snoring. Then I hit an entry that froze me. Date, January 3rd, 1997. I saw him today. I can't stop thinking about him. God, he's everything I wanted, but I know I can't. I can't tell anyone. Not yet. I paused. Who was him? She never mentioned anyone before Dad, at least not in front of me. And something about the way she wrote it, it wasn't just a crush. It was intense. I flipped through more pages. Every entry, for years, had the same pattern. Mentions of a man, always him. Descriptions of dinners, conversations, dreams, confessions. She was in love. Not casually. She was obsessed. And my stomach started to twist when I realized something horrifying. Some of the entries overlapped with the months right before I was born. I kept reading, desperate, scared, and sick all at once. Then I found it. His name. Just one entry. He wasn't a fleeting mention. He wasn't a vague memory. He had a name, and it was so familiar I couldn't place it at first. Then I did. Sort of. It was the kind of name that might not mean much to anyone else. But to me, I had this vague, gnawing sense of recognition. I Googled it, because at this point, I had no idea what else to do. And what I found nearly made me drop the laptop. Obituary. Picture. And there he was. Older, smiling, but holding a baby. A baby that looked exactly like me. My baby picture, unmistakable. I had to sit down. My hands were shaking. I read it again and again. The dates, the family relations, everything matched up. That man wasn't my dad. At least, not biologically. He was my uncle. My real dad was his brother. And the man who had raised me? He hated me for years. I always chalked it up to his cold personality, his quiet, reserved nature. But it wasn't just temperament. It was personal. Deeply personal. I remember looking around the attic suddenly, seeing every dusty corner as a cage, every family photo as a lie. Mom had carried this secret her entire life, and Dad, my dad, the man I called Dad, he had known. Probably the moment he found out, he made a choice. Not to leave me, but to resent me. To love me with a fraction of himself, always keeping distance, always keeping control. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I kept scrolling through her entries, trying to find more clues. Why did she hide it? Why did she keep me in this complicated, twisted life? And then it hit me. The thing I hadn't allowed myself to face. All those years I felt alien in my own home. All the subtle punishments. All the coldness. It wasn't random. It was inherited hate. A chain reaction of guilt and betrayal I was born into without asking for it. I shoved the journal into my bag and ran downstairs. I had to see the obit again, study the picture, force my brain to reconcile what it was seeing. And I realized something that terrified me more than anything. My whole life had been a lie. Every bedtime story, every hug, every fight, filtered through someone else's rage and grief. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I wondered, what does that make me? Who am I really? I didn't sleep that night. I barely ate. I just sat on my bedroom floor with the journal open in my lap and my laptop pulled close, replaying every entry, every word, Every damn hint my mom had left behind. I had always thought of my childhood as normal, or as close to normal as a kid with a grumpy dad could have. But now, I was seeing the cracks, the little fractures I had ignored. Her love letters weren't just to a man she once fancied. They were to my real dad, the man I'd never met. And everything I'd known about my life was suddenly a set of lies patched together for convenience. I kept going back to that obituary. The man's name, let's call him Mark, was unmistakable. Born in '69, died last year, apparently in a car accident. There he was in the photo, holding a baby with the same wide-eyed, chubby-cheeked look I have in every old photo my mom kept. My brain couldn't process it at first. My own life, my whole identity, had been rewritten without me even knowing it. I kept reading the journal. Some entries were mundane, heartbreaking almost, like she was trying to keep normalcy alive while hiding the secret. Others were explosive. One entry in particular had me shaking so badly I dropped the journal on the floor. She had written about giving birth, about holding me for the first time, and then about the guilt, the fear, the decision she had made to let my uncle raise me instead of my biological father. I don't know if he'll ever love me the way I want him to. I don't know if my baby will know love at all if he grows up with his uncle. But I can't. I can't let him see Mark and know the truth yet. It would destroy everything. Everything. That one word kept bouncing in my skull. Everything. My childhood, my family, my memories, all of it was built on this lie. And Dad, my uncle, he had known. Maybe he found out before I was even old enough to speak. Maybe he'd made a conscious choice to love me in a way that was half real, half resentful. The next day, I started digging. Not just through her journal, but online. I found Mark's obituary in a local paper archive, but the photo was the kicker. There I was, my baby self, in his arms. That's when the mental hammer hit. I remembered the way Dad had always acted around me. Always so distant, so cold. Every little punishment, every criticism. It wasn't just me being sensitive or him being a strict parent. It was resentment. And it got worse. I found an old social media account linked to Mark. He had a brother, my uncle, the man who raised me. And there were posts, comments, photos, everything painted a picture I wasn't ready for. A story of two brothers, a secret romance, a pregnancy no one knew how to handle, and a decision that left me in the middle. I started piecing together the timeline. Mom had me, quietly, secretly, knowing my uncle would take me in. She married my uncle after Mark's death? No, she didn't. She married my uncle years before I was old enough to remember. That meant my dad, the man I thought was my dad, had married my mom after the fact? Or maybe he just stayed. Stayed because he loved her. Or stayed because he felt obligated. Or maybe stayed because he resented me. The realization hit me like a punch. Every argument, every time he blew up at me for small things I didn't understand, it wasn't just his personality. It was hate, directed at me. And somehow, it was justified in his mind. I spent the next few days going through every photo in the house. Every baby photo, every family trip. I stared at my own face in the photos, at the subtle differences between me and Dad, at the resemblance to Mark, at the way Mom's eyes softened when she looked at me in pictures, something I'd never understood fully before. It was devastating. And weirdly, I felt a flicker of understanding, too. My mom had loved Mark in a way that was raw, intense, and dangerous. She had carried that love into every choice she made, even if it hurt her family. And my uncle, my dad, he had carried his own pain, his own grief and resentment, and it shaped every moment I'd lived through. I had to see someone about this. Not legally, not yet, but emotionally. I reached out to my best friend, Dylan, and told him everything. The journal, the obituary, the photos. He didn't say much, just listened, which was exactly what I needed. And when I hung up the phone, I realized I had two choices: spiral into self-pity and rage, or start figuring out how to live with this new reality. And I couldn't stop thinking about Mom, about what she went through, about her hiding in her room at night, writing furiously in that journal, holding a secret that could have destroyed everything, about her loving me fiercely while knowing that I wasn't technically hers, or at least, technically, I belonged to someone else too. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got, not at her, but at the people who left me in this mess. At the secrecy, at the quiet resentment, at the lies. And then, a thought so twisted it made me shiver. If my uncle hated me for being Mark's son, Did he know all along? Did he plan to shape me into something he could tolerate? That night, I sat back in my chair, staring at the journal. I realized something terrifying and thrilling at the same time. I had the power to uncover everything. The truth about my mom, about my uncle, about my own identity. And I couldn't stop myself, because for the first time in my life, I needed answers. And I was ready to dig as deep as it took. The next morning, I couldn't wait any longer. I had to start putting the pieces together. I knew some of the answers were out there, somewhere. People who remembered Mom, Mark, the life she had before I was born. I grabbed the journal, laptop, and my phone, and made a plan. Start small, one person at a time. First, I dug into my mom's old friends. Not the casual acquaintances, but the ones she mentioned frequently. Her closest co-workers from before I was born, the ones she wrote about in the journal. There were names, emails, some old social media handles. I messaged the first one, a woman named Linda, nervously typing out a brief, careful message. Hi, I'm trying to piece together some family history about my mom. Carol, last name. She mentioned you often. I hope it's okay to reach out. I didn't expect a reply, but 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Hi. Wow, it's been a long time. I'd be happy to help. Can we talk? I felt my heart pound. This was it. Someone who knew my mom's life before me. I arranged a call for that evening. Linda's voice on the phone was warm but hesitant, like she was walking on fragile glass. She asked questions about me, about what I wanted to know, and then she started telling stories. Stories about my mom when she was young, about Mark, the man she had loved, about how crazy it was, how dangerous, how impossible it seemed. She was obsessed with him, Linda said. And he loved her too, but there were things he couldn't do. He had this a life, responsibilities. And then the accident. God, it was tragic. And Carol, she was crushed. She hid it all, every letter, every thought, every tiny memory of him. She never wanted you to know, not until she thought you were ready. I felt a twist in my stomach. She spoke as if she was describing someone else's tragedy, but it was mine. My mother's pain, hidden in plain sight, had shaped my entire life without me knowing. After that call, I couldn't stop. I found more names, Mark's friends, his co-workers, even a few distant relatives. Everyone knew him, and many remembered the baby. No one had any idea that I'd survived, that my mom had hidden me, that my uncle, my dad, had taken me in. Then came the hardest part, confronting the truth about my uncle. I needed to know what he knew, what he felt, and why he treated me the way he did. But I wasn't ready to talk to him directly yet. Not yet. First, I dug through old records, public announcements, even property documents. I found old letters between him and my mom, carefully saved, hidden in folders no one would ever touch. The tone was polite, almost cordial, but underneath rage, pain, guilt. It was a punch to the chest reading those letters. The man who raised me, the man I had trusted, argued with, loved and feared, had felt anger at my very existence. I had always assumed it was my fault, that I had done something wrong as a kid. But now I understood. I was the physical reminder of a love he couldn't have, a brother he had lost, a child who wasn't supposed to be his responsibility. I felt a mix of emotions I couldn't name. Rage, betrayal, sorrow, and a strange, bitter understanding. He wasn't a villain. He was a man broken by circumstance, trying to live with a family secret he hated as much as he loved. And I was caught in the middle. The next revelation came from Mark's sister, someone I found through social media. I hesitated before messaging her, but I had to know. I needed the truth. Her reply was immediate. She agreed to meet at a small coffee shop. I remember driving there, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles hurt. My mind raced with questions. Would she recognize me? Would she confirm everything? Would I finally understand the woman I called mom, the man I called dad, and the life I'd been living? Sitting across from her, I realized how much I had imagined this moment. She looked at me, eyes wide, and then gasped softly. "Oh my God, you look just like him." She meant Mark, my real father. And in that moment, the world shifted again. Every assumption I had about my identity, my family, everything, felt smaller than it should. She told me stories that made me laugh, cry, and want to scream all at once. How Mark had loved my mom, how he had dreamed of a family, and how the accident had shattered him before I was even born. How my mom had fought to keep me alive in a world that didn't make space for me. How my uncle had struggled, trapped between grief and responsibility, and how that struggle had turned into resentment at a child he never asked for but had to raise. By the time I left the coffee shop, I was exhausted, my mind buzzing with revelations. I was angry. I was sad. I was grateful. And most of all, I was determined. Determined to piece together my life, to understand my past, and to finally confront the man who had raised me. Because the truth wasn't just in the journal. The truth was in every hidden letter, every photograph, every whisper from the people who had been part of my mom's life. And I was ready to dig as deep as it took, no matter how painful it was. That night, back in my room, I opened the journal again. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. Mom had left me a map, a trail, a guide. Every secret, every emotion, every confession, it was all there. She had trusted me to follow it, to find the truth she couldn't tell me in life. And for the first time, I realized something I'd never allowed myself to believe. Maybe, just maybe, I was ready. I couldn't sleep that night. Not because of the revelations, but because I kept replaying my childhood in my head. Every argument, every silent dinner, every time my dad had snapped at me for no reason, it all made sense now. And the realization didn't make it easier to forgive him. If anything, it made everything heavier. I couldn't stop thinking about the years I'd spent trying to earn his approval, trying to be a kid he could love, and now I knew why it had always felt impossible. I was never just his nephew. I was his brother's child. And that changed everything. The next day, I knew I had to confront him. I had to hear it from him. I had to know what he felt, why he acted the way he did, and how he could live with that kind of resentment for so long. But it wasn't simple. This was a man who had been my father in every legal sense, but not in blood. And I had loved him, even hated him, because of that. Now, everything was tangled. I found him in the kitchen, as usual, drinking his coffee in silence. He didn't look up when I came in. "We need to talk," I said. My voice sounded firmer than I felt. He finally glanced at me, eyebrows raised. That look, calm, unreadable, but loaded, made my stomach twist. "About what?" he asked, almost casual. I took a deep breath. "About everything. About Mom. About Mark. About me. About you. About why you treated me the way you did." He didn't respond immediately. He set down the mug, sighed, and finally met my eyes. There was something there, guilt, regret, anger, maybe all of it. "I guess this day was coming," he said softly. "Sit down." And we did. I sat across from him at the kitchen table, my chest tight, my mind racing with every word I wanted to say. He started talking first, his voice low, controlled. "I hated it. I hated the fact that you existed, that Mom loved you the way she did, that Mark, that it was his life that got taken from him. I hated myself for being forced to raise a child that wasn't mine in the way I wanted. And I hated you, because you were a reminder of everything I couldn't fix." I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. I wanted to cry. Instead, I just sat there, letting him speak, letting him finally say the things I had felt in my bones for years. "I wasn't fair to you," he continued. "I tried in my own way. I provided for you. I kept you safe. I taught you things. But I can't lie, I never loved you the same way I would have if things had been different." The room went quiet. I felt like I could hear my own heart pounding in my ears. "You mean, because I'm Mark's kid?" I asked. My voice trembled, but I had to say it. "Yes," he admitted. And hearing it out loud was like a knife twisting. "I resented you. I couldn't separate you from him. And I'm sorry. I'm so damn sorry. I wanted to shake him. I wanted to punch him. I wanted to hug him. I wanted everything at once. But mostly, I just wanted him to understand that the years of distance, of coldness, of quiet hatred, they had shaped me, too. We didn't solve everything in one conversation. We didn't hug it out or forgive each other magically. But for the first time, I felt like I had permission to feel everything I'd been holding inside. Anger, grief, betrayal, confusion. I could acknowledge the pain without it consuming me entirely. After that, I turned my attention back to my mom's journal. The entries suddenly felt different. Not just confessions, but guidance. Mom had lived her whole life carrying impossible burdens. Her love for Mark, her fear for me, her secrecy, it had all been a balancing act. And now, I could see it clearly. She hadn't failed me. She had protected me in the only way she could. I also started thinking about what this meant for me going forward. My identity, my sense of self, it wasn't erased by these revelations. If anything, it was expanded. I was Mark's son, yes, but I was also my mother's son, my uncle's stepson, a man who had survived being the center of hidden conflicts and secret resentments. That made me complicated, yes, but also resilient. The next step, I realized, was deciding how to move forward with my life knowing the truth. I wanted to meet people I hadn't known existed, to understand Mark better, to claim my history without erasing the life I'd already lived. It was daunting, terrifying even, but I had to do it. I started small. Old photographs, letters, the few keepsakes my mom had left behind. I traced the names, the faces, the connections. Every piece of evidence brought new feelings, sadness, joy, longing, regret. Every discovery felt like a step closer to understanding myself and my family fully. And through it all, I kept thinking about Mom, about the sacrifices she had made, about the love she had carried in silence, about how much she had wanted me to be happy, even if the world had made that nearly impossible. I don't think I'll ever stop feeling the weight of what I discovered. But I also know this. I survived it. I'm here, and I will find a way to live fully, not trapped by the past, not defined solely by the secrets and mistakes of others. That night, I closed the journal and looked around the room. Everything felt different now. Every shadow, every corner, every quiet space in this house. It was filled with history, with pain, with love. And I finally felt ready to navigate it. Because sometimes, knowing the truth is the first step to freedom. After the kitchen conversation with my uncle, I felt lighter, in a way. Not completely free, nothing like that, but like I'd finally started peeling back the layers of this life I'd been living without understanding it. Still, a part of me was restless. I needed to see Mark, my real dad, in a way I never could, and I needed to know everything about the choices my mom had made. I started by reaching out to anyone who had known Mark intimately, friends, coworkers, even distant relatives. Most were surprised I existed, some were overjoyed, some were hesitant. But slowly, piece by piece, I started constructing a picture of him, the life he had lived, the man he had been before tragedy intervened. And then I found something that made me stop cold. An old photo album Mark's sister had scanned and shared with me. There I was, a baby in his arms, my mom crouched behind them, smiling softly. But there were other photos, Mark holding another baby, his eyes full of pride and love. Another child, another life he had started before I ever existed. And then I realized he never stopped caring. Every letter, every social media post, every recollection I gathered, he had loved me from afar. He had mourned not just his own fate, but the life he couldn't claim, and yet somehow, I had been loved in secret. That night, I sat on my bed with the journal, the photographs, my laptop, and a notebook. I started writing everything down, piecing together a timeline, adding names, dates, details I had uncovered over the past weeks. It was exhausting, emotionally draining, but also liberating. For the first time, I could see my life for what it truly was. Not just the lie I had lived, but a story layered with sacrifice, love, grief, and survival. I thought about my uncle again, about how much he had struggled. I realized the resentment hadn't been simple hatred. It had been grief, displacement, helplessness. He had been forced into a role he hadn't chosen, raising a child that wasn't biologically his in place of his brother, trying to navigate a family that was fractured before I even came along. And while I still carried anger toward him, I could see the complexity behind it. That didn't erase the years of distance, the emotional walls, the criticism. But it gave me context. It gave me understanding. And then, finally, I started thinking about my mom. About how fiercely she had loved both Mark and me. About the impossible decisions she had made, the secrecy she had maintained, the emotional burden she had carried silently for decades. I realized something that shook me to my core. She had sacrificed everything, not just for me, but for the fragile balance of a family that might have shattered otherwise. I had spent years wondering why she had been sad, why she had sometimes seemed distant, why she had never shared everything. Now I understood. Her sadness had been love and fear intertwined. The next step was the hardest, processing what this all meant for me personally. Identity isn't just biology. It's experience, memory, and connection. I had been raised by my uncle, loved by my mom, unknowingly watched over by Mark. And now I had to reconcile all of that. I had to decide what it meant to call someone dad, what it meant to claim a father I never met, and how to honor the people who had shaped me, even imperfectly. I called my uncle the next morning. We didn't talk about blame. We didn't argue. We just sat together in the living room, silent at first. Then gradually, we shared memories. Not as father and son, not as uncle and nephew, but as two people who had survived complicated love, loss, and truth. It wasn't easy. It wasn't neat, but it was real. Then, over the next few weeks, I met some of Mark's old friends. People who had known him as a man full of charm, laughter, and heartbreak. People who had mourned him and carried stories of him they had never shared publicly. I realized I wasn't just uncovering my past. I was discovering a man I would never meet, but whose presence had defined my life in ways I hadn't understood. I could grieve him, celebrate him, and claim the part of me that was his, all at once. And in the quiet moments, late nights, afternoons alone in the attic, mornings sipping coffee in the kitchen, I started feeling something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Not complete closure, because that's impossible in a story like this, but a sense of understanding, of belonging, even in a family defined by secrets, of knowing the truth and surviving it. I kept the journal on my nightstand. I read entries sometimes, not to relive pain, but to feel her presence, to feel the love she had carried silently, the sacrifices she had made, and the woman who had fought to give me a life even when the world had complicated it beyond reason. The story isn't simple. There's no perfect ending. My uncle and I are still navigating our relationship, Mark's friends still sharing stories, and I still carry the weight of all these revelations. But I've learned something vital. Life doesn't need to be perfect to be meaningful. People don't need to be flawless to be loved. And secrets, no matter how devastating, can sometimes lead to understanding if you're brave enough to face them. I've learned who I am, who my parents were, and how love, messy, complicated, imperfect love, can survive even the harshest truths. And for the first time, I feel like I can finally breathe. If you made it all the way to the end, thanks for sticking with me. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed the story, consider subscribing to the channel and giving the video a like. It helps me share more stories like this. Thanks.